Good morning. It is Monday, January 20th, 2025, and we are pleased to have you join yet another edition of Rethinking Freedom. And whether you are listening to us live on the radio or you're catching us on the podcast on our YouTube channel, we welcome you and we thank you for being part of this family, this movement as we rethink freedom. Today we have an incredible program for you. I don't want to call it a show because no one is here buck dancing for anybody. This is an invitation for us to have a conversation, to think through things, to come up with some action steps. And I want to thank all of you who have been leaving comments on our YouTube channel because this is where the work happens. So today we are going to talk about the legacies of some historical figures and explore their relevance in our world today. People such as Martin Luther King, befitting, this is the day that is set aside to celebrate him in the United States of America. But we're also going to be talking about some other figures that you may never have heard of or just know just a little bit about. Patrice Lumumba. Some of you may have heard of Muhammad Ali. I hope you have, formerly Cassius Clay. And then we're even going to be looking at the TikTok ban and some of the concerns regarding the impending deportations by the incoming administration. And for some of you, by the time you hear this, the 47th president of the United States would have been sworn in. Good luck to all of us, I would say. So today I have with me two amazing guests. They have been guests on my show before, but these are men who are so well-read and beyond well-read. These are men who are doing things in their community. And so I want to introduce them to you and we will dive right into our program today. And so stay tuned, listen, get your notepads, subscribe, like, share, all of those things. I'm going to start with Dr. Rodney Duckett. Dr. Rodney L. Duckett is a distinguished family nurse practitioner with a wealth of experience in education, holding a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree, and I would say boasting over 30 years in the healthcare field. That is a field that can burn you out in a second, so congratulations, sir. Notably recognized for his innovative thinking during his time in the Army, he continues to serve his country at Central Texas Healthcare Services, the VA hospital, providing essential care to veterans in the emergency department for the past 23 years. I know he looks like he's just 25, so we don't know how he got started, but that's okay. He's also the founder of Impact Outreach, a nonprofit organization dedicated to mentoring adolescents transitioning from the juvenile justice system. He exhibits a deep commitment to empowering youth. I have seen this firsthand. Furthermore, his passion for history and archaeology has taken him across 3 continents and 16 countries and counting, where he has conducted research alongside esteemed scholars. In addition to all of these endeavors, he's also actively involved in mentoring student nurses and healthcare professionals, because that's what leaders do. They lead. And I had a mentor once who said, if you are leading and there's no one following you, you are just taking a walk. So be clear. Be clear on that. Be clear on that. If no one is following you, you are not a leader. I'm sorry. Let me get back to this. So his research interests lie in the areas of public health, social disparities, community mental health, and the preservation of cultural heritage through initiatives like Heritage Legacy Curators. Through his work, he advocates for the importance of embracing one's cultural identity and oral history as pillars of community empowerment. We're going to have more of his bio in the links, particularly if you go to our YouTube channel, because we actually want you to hear from our guests, because otherwise I could spend half our session just introducing them. But Dr. Duckett, welcome to Rethinking Freedom again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure always to put in some work with you.
Yes, and that's what we do, put in some work. And this next gentleman that I'm going to introduce is not here in Central Texas like Dr. Duckett and I are. He's all the way in the UK. He is one of the subjects of King Charles, the same King Charles and the royal family that I only found out last week own over 6 billion acres of land across the world. One family, 6 billion acres of land. Who did they displace? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be introducing you. Let me get to that. But yeah, he is a loyal subject of those imperialists who are very happy to continue to benefit from the imperialism. Adesoji says, this our next guest, Adesoji Iginla, he says, until the lions have their historians, tales of the hunt shall always glorify the hunter. Yes. And I suppose the hunter shall always have all the people's land. Okay, Adesoji Iginla is a seasoned content creator, thought leader, and author of the Amazon bestseller, Africa Illuminated. Go get a copy. As the host of the YouTube channel, Adesoji Speaks Knowledge, he is dedicated to reframing the narrative about Africa by uncovering the stories of fearless and visionary African leaders. You want to subscribe to Adesoji Speaks Knowledge because every week you learn so much. He talks about visionary African leaders, resilient communities, and the untold histories that have shaped the continent. A former host of the Kumbukeni podcast on YouTube and a regular contributor to WBAI 99.5 FM New York Radio, Adesoji is committed to providing meticulously researched and fact-checked content that highlights Africa's agency, humanity, and rich heritage. And since all the billionaires are folding like wet newspapers, and we will have no more fact-checking on the social media streets, we certainly need to appreciate people like him. He currently hosts the weekly African News Review, a live stream series featuring influential voices like Milton Alamadi. He brings dynamic, thought-provoking discussions to a global audience. His mission is to empower his audience with knowledge, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate Africa's diverse stories. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Adesoji, and you want to go and subscribe to that channel. So, gentlemen, Adesoji, welcome again to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get right to it. Today is the actual day that has been set aside to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy here in the United States of America. I believe this day was first put into place as a holiday back in, I think it was 1985, if I'm not mistaken. But actually, his wife, Coretta Scott King, started a Martin Luther King Day celebration back in 1971. I believe January 30th of 1971 was the very first one. What's interesting about us now having a Martin Luther King Day is that when Martin Luther King died, his supposed approval rate was under 30%. People did not like him. And when I say people, I'm not just talking about white folk, although, yes, they made up the bulk of it. There were even people within the Black community who felt like he was a troublemaker. He and those civil rights folk were troublemakers, and don't come and stir up our stuff. We figured out how to work and live with our master. But I guess my question to both of you is, what do you see as his enduring legacy? And what lessons should we be taking from that as we face a whole new and yet familiar set of challenges?
Man, that is a good one. You still got me stuck on ordering this brother's book on Amazon for my boys. So books are like toys to me. Like I like, I got to get his book because I meet with the boys today, So, but you know what? Dr. King's ability to openness in his evolution. The civil rights movement was something I believe in his heart. I just went dark. That he was stepping away from. And if you notice, Dr. King was becoming very worldly traveled. One of the things people didn't realize, he actually visited Marcus Garvey's gravesite in Jamaica. He talked to a lot of Pan-Africanists, to get their input and views, because a lot of his stuff was mainly unilateral with the civil rights movement. Integration into a burning house was just the opening statement that he made. So his ability to evolve, to actually bring in Blacks. And we also seen this again with Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton reached out all through Chicago. He reached out to poor whites, he reached out to Hispanics, and he reached out to blacks that were disconnected and made a unified front. And it's a word that I've been saying for the longest, understanding the language of the people, but also teaching the people how to coalesce with one another. And I think that's what Dr. King was doing, trying to coalesce with other black unities and factions, putting the ideological principles to the side, the ego to the side, and see how we can coalesce as one body to fight the head of the beast.
Yes. Very, great insights. Yes, go ahead, Adesoji.
Yeah, so Dr. King also did something. He expanded the reach of, beyond traditional borders within the United States. So he extended as far as the world. So for him, he felt bringing African Americans in conversation with Africans in other parts of the world, and indeed on the continent, would further, accelerate the freedom thought within the United States. So how did he do that? He was party to the independence celebration of Ghana, March 6, 1957, and he was also in London. So now what he's doing is, if I'm here and I'm also there, but I am from here, meaning the United States, I am doing what the imperialists also do, but with a different lens. I'm pulling people together. Building a global community means what you now do is make their issues your issues and his issues become our issues. I mean, as we go further, you will see how Malcolm X also now towing that same line went onto the continent and made the civil rights issue a United Nations matter. So you begin to see that his danger to the establishment, quote unquote, was not just because of who he was, but what he represents going forward. Sometimes it's not the seed, but it's what the seed will produce thereafter that becomes the embodiment of fear. Because if it's one thing that the United States establishment try as much as possible to do, is contain the spirit of freedom within the United States.
Wow. To make sure. So it's interesting as you're both talking and evoking Malcolm X as well. What we see is that as our leaders evolve, wherever they started, they understand that we actually need to cross the borders. We need to get beyond these artificial lines and understand that we're one. Marcus Garvey certainly understood that. And that's what he was trying to accomplish, is bringing peoples of African descent wherever we were together to work together. But when you're talking about containing freedom and the threat of the seed, so to the extent that Martin Luther King was assassinated, murdered, as a young 39-year-old, I'm older than 39. I think each of you is older than 39 as well. So if you can imagine, did they succeed? I mean, what was the impact of that assassination? And what is it that we have forgotten? Or maybe that we're continuing from what we learned from his life? And of course, we know that Martin Luther King himself was not the civil rights movement. We understand, actually, if we're really if we really break down the civil rights movement, that we're going to find more women, mostly behind the scenes, than the men who were in front. But what has been the impact of his assassination at such a young age? And as we celebrate him today, what is it that we're celebrating? What has been curated for us to celebrate?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like to address your first question that you posed. There is a pattern of events that goes on. Anytime you remove the head, the body should fall. And you see that in every instance. Malcolm X is removed, the body falls. Okay, rebirth of the Black Panther, eliminate Huey, Cleaver, kill Fred Hampton, body dies. Okay, we also see that Patrice Lumumba, body dies. So you always attack the head. And that's something that they know. I've always said this, and I truly believe this. a black man is not afraid of a white man. Never. He's not even designed. It's mano a mano. A black man is afraid of a coalition of white men because we know what a coalition of white men can do. But a white man is always afraid of one black man. A group of white men are afraid of one black man. And it's normally the influential black person that can draw people together to coalesce. And that's the one they take out.
I think some of us, not that you should use movies as your frame of reference for history, but there was a powerful scene in the Malcolm X movie.
The finger pointing.
Yeah, go ahead, Ade. So do you know which one?
The finger pointing when he waved the finger and the group followed, and the guy in the frame said, "That's too much power for one black man to have." So I mean, speaking of that power, I won't say his legacy has been diminished in any shape or form. I'll actually say it's blossomed. And the reason I'll say it's blossomed is the three of us are having this conversation across borders. That's a continuation of that conversation. That we are still reaching across the borders to say, oh, okay, I see what is about to come into fruition on your side of the world. It's very unpleasant, but we've been here before. And so this is where history comes into play. So what is it that we did when, unfortunately, he was killed, but his idea still lives on, the idea of interconnectivity amongst people? That is the key legacy. It's that interconnectivity that we should continue to build on. Yes, the I've got a dream speech will be, passed. They will pick out parts that are palatable. They will drop out parts that, questions their actions, their motives, and their movements. The key for us is, like you said earlier, what part of it has been curated for us? We have to go beyond the curation. We have to really sit with who he was and how he evolved over time. What did he change? And then again, sometimes we don't really have to start from scratch. You just have to build on momentum. Mm-hmm. He got as far as organizing the Montgomery bus boycott, which was a success in itself. That is the power that we need to harness. Power of organization. What are we doing?
Power of organization, yes.
Yes.
And as people, give me one second, as people are thinking about a call to action, this was something that was in my notes. If you say you are about liberation and you are not involved in any organization, you're not serious. Because one individual, one solitary human being just working, what you do individually is okay, but to really bring about change, we need to come together. So sometimes people are like, I don't want to deal with this. No, you need to get connected. That doesn't mean you have to live every day with those people you're connected with, but you do have to be connected. We do need to be organized. Please go ahead, Dr. Duckett.
No, I remember my mentor, Mr. Al Dunn in Tulsa, Oklahoma, very heavily involved in the civil rights movement. And he would always go and quote Matthew 13:57, I believe it is. And he said Dr. King was a byproduct of that. And it wasn't until later on when I actually really sat down and read that one day when he was talking about a prophet is never honored in his own home. And you see that with Dr. King. He wasn't honored into his death. A lot of people thought what he was doing was just rebel rousing, just going down there and making trouble for no absolute reason. Even though these are the same people behind closed doors that hated the way the system was designed, but did not have that courage inside of them to do anything. And I truly believe what Bob Marley says, that fear is nothing more than premature courage not yet manifested. And what Dr. King was doing was taking that fear that people were having in the South and manifesting that in the great courage. And you've seen that body coalesce together in what's known as a civil rights movement as the combustion engine moved forward for us to be able to have this platform with Aya to talk freely today. So again, we now honor what we call the prophet, but before then, He was not a prophet. You know, he was just a man that was just going from town to town, starting trouble. But the trouble that he was starting was actually good trouble, as John Lewis would say. And without that trouble, we wouldn't be where we are today. So
we would not have the rights that are now being eroded. And
yes, that's true.
My challenge to my generation is we were handed down a set of rights and privileges by the generation before. And we are at risk of being the generation that leaves our children with less rights and privileges than we received.
Yeah.
And that's on us. And we got to figure out what we are going to do about that. Because I think the civil rights movement occurred, integration, and that could be a whole other show, program that we do. And many of us got complacent, and we bought into, as we transition into Patrice Lumumba, we bought into this notion of what freedom is. And it was about this individual exceptionalism, being the first Negro here and the first Black there, but without that same focus on coming together, whether it's our Black churches that played such a major role, as we know, in the civil rights movement, or our Black attorneys or physicians, our leaders across the board who understood we had one common fight to some degree. You know, it's going to be some differences. But one of the things that I would caution us about is allowing other people to curate our history or what we remember.
Yes.
And here in Central Texas, in Killeen, we are having a Martin Luther King event tomorrow called Dream, Reality, or Nightmare, a Martin Luther King community discussion. It's 10 a.m. It's going to be at the Dallas Community Center. Just show up. We've got lunch, all of that. But the what I see sometimes with how our leaders are curated is they are made into these little fluffy puppies that we just pet. And it takes away an understanding of the work they did, the sacrifice, and the ongoing work and sacrifice that is required of us. So Martin Luther King was out in the streets. Martin Luther King became more dangerous as he evolved when he went to Chicago and is living with the people and calling out the issues and saying, you can't treat my people this way. When he's talking about the Poor People's Campaign, and now he's saying it's not just a Black issue. Listen, this capitalism is an issue. When he now speaks up against the Vietnam War, it's like, oh, Negro, you have really now, like you really should have stayed in your place, because now you are bringing together other groups of people, and this is going to be a force that we can't contend with. So whatever the issue is, you know, whatever story you want to believe as to why he was killed, he was a threat. And then we know that at the time that he died, he was disliked. Now, Reagan also did not sign his birthday into law as a holiday because he wanted to. It was, you know, the force of really Coretta Scott King talking about women behind the scenes who pushed this agenda for her husband. But then it's like, oh, he had a dream, and we have frozen him in this dream and nothing else. And so fast forward today, all across America, there are going to be Black communities, and we're just marching and talking about the dream. But I'm really needing us to wake up and start to do the work, which is what Dr. King did. They didn't just march. They had demands. They had a plan. They had a strategy for wherever they went to march. And now we're just symbolically marching. And I'm like, there needs to be more to it. But let's segue really quickly, and we'll keep going back and forth because all of these things fit together. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Adesoji, you want to tell us a little bit about who is Patrice Lumumba? Why should we care?
Okay, so Patrice Lumumba was the first democratically elected prime minister of Congo. And for those who are not aware, Congo was, prior to independence, the personal property of one man, King Leopold II. And wherein the Berlin Conference happened. The Berlin Conference happened to be the conference where the continent of Africa was split into all those 54 units you now have.
So wait a second. So you're saying the people lived on their land, and then there was a conference, and then some groups of people just said, you know what? All of this area, we're gonna just give it to you, Leopold. Is that what you're saying? Oh, okay.
Well, that's it. Okay. So wherein other countries sat at the table and split the territory based on national ideals, and he was one man who took literally the heart of Africa, because Congo sits right in the center of Africa. It sits on the equator, and proceeded to exploit this land to the detriment of the people. So 1960, independence was declared. Lumumba becomes prime minister. Prior to becoming prime minister, he was already in the eye of the storm. By that, I mean the Belgians did not like him. In fact, he won against their opponent, Kasavubu, who should have been the prime minister, but he ended up becoming a ceremonial president. So the die was cast. But if you read the history books, the point where they decided he was no longer beneficiary to the system was when he said, and I quote, "All the mineral resources within the Congo should be used for the benefit of the people of Congo and that of Africans." And the fact that he said that whilst the king of Belgium at that time, King Boudin II, was sat, the king felt slighted. He got up in a huff and walked off. And then his cards were marked. The Americans came in because they already had their eyes on the uranium available within the Congo. So machinations and what have you, a lot that we can't cover just in this 1 hour stretch transpired. He became a persona non grata. Eventually, he was captured. Can you imagine the prime minister of a country captured within his own country, a part of his country excised, meaning divided away from Congo, because that part of the country, the eastern part of the country, which is actually, if you look at the news now, when you hear war is happening in the eastern part of the Congo, why? That's where all the majority of the mineral resources of Congo lies. And all the interests you have, your Apple, your Tesla, your Samsung, they're all benefiting as a result of that anarchy. And suffice to say, they handed over Lumumba to the excise area, led by another lackey, Western lackey, Moise Dushombe, who signed off his death warrant, and eventually he was assassinated. The world will only get to know of the assassination on the morning of January 17, 1961, meaning the guy spent only 6 months in office. And in that 6 months in office, if you read all his speeches, there is one common thread. The interest of my people is the most important thing, not even what happens to me. Because in his last letter to his wife, he said, and I quote, "The history of Africa will someday be told, but it will not be a history told from Brussels, Washington, or London, but it will be told by the people of Africa of their own glory." Again, going back to the idea of curating our history for us, he is telling you right from the grave that you need to be your own agent. You need to speak for yourself. He said, and as if he knew what was coming, he said, "It doesn't really matter whether I live or die. One thing is clear."
We heard Martin Luther King say the same thing.
Exactly. So you begin to see a common thread, because when you lead, and I will quote Muhammad Ali here, you cannot...
Hold on, because I interrupted you. You were saying a quote from Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah, I'm still going.
Okay, so awesome.
It still ties in with the quote, because he said, "You cannot be brave without fear.
Mm.
Some people think because they're afraid, they're weak. No, to push back against something, you have to first of all take a second thought. That second thought is the fear of the unknown. But when you push through, that is bravery manifested. So Lumumba reminds us that it is important that we continue to underscore our own agency. So when they tell you you are this because you look like this, you have to question, where is that statement coming from? Based on what? Simply because you say something is so, it's not the case. You're thinking, you're dealing with somebody, like you said, you're dealing with somebody who has 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, a heart, just like you.
So quick question. How was Lumumba killed? Because well, maybe not everybody knows. In the case of Martin Luther King, actually went to visit the area where he was assassinated. It was a gunshot from a building across the street, and they shot him, and he did not survive the wounds from that. How was Patrice Lumumba killed, and what year was he killed?
So he was killed the night of January 16, 1961. And he was killed by firing squad after they brutally tortured him. Mm-hmm. And because he refused to renounce his premiership of Congo, mm-hmm. They beat him to a pulp, tied him to a tree. And I also have to underscore this. He wasn't the only one that was captured. There were 3 of them. The president of the Senate, Okito, and the Minister of Defense at the time, Umpolo. So the 3 of them, Umpolo, Okito, and Lumumba. But they killed Okito and Umpolo first in the morning. They were waiting on the order to do the same thing to Lumumba. And they were asking him to renounce his premiership, and he refused. And so they tied him to a tree, shot him by a firing squad. They wanted him to, what's the word? They asked if he wanted the blindfold. He said, no, I need to look at my killer in the eye. And they shot him, and not knowing what to do with the body, they dissolved the body in acid. And the only thing that was left was a golden tooth that fell out when they were beating him. That was it.
How old was he when he was assassinated?
He was 39.
There's something about numbers, and again, we're not going to unpack it on this show, but Malcolm X, 39, I believe. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King, 39. Lumumba, 39. There are some others as well.
Thomas Sankara, 39.
Thomas Sankara, 39. Mm-hmm. This thing of cutting people down in their prime and just interrupting their lives, and therefore interrupting or at least attempting to interrupt what their influence will be. Dr. Duckett, any thoughts on the life and death of Lumumba and lessons that we should continue to learn from this and apply even across the continent?
I remember the first time that my mother assigned me that book to read. I couldn't stop reading it. Even hearing the story today just evokes so much emotion from me because it's a story of betrayal, but it's also a story of what masculinity is all about. Because you're going to die, but you're going to hold your morals into your last breath, and that says a lot about him. I think it was, and the brother may know, 2021 or 2022, they put that tooth in a casket. I remember BBC talking about that, and they wanted to send it home to his granddaughter, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And the president of the time was not even really apologetic to her about what had happened. And all they wanted to do was to get the body home, or the tooth home. Remnants of the tooth home, which again just shows you the deplorable acts of the Belgium. I can go on and on and on and on and on, but one thing that I will say is it never stopped with him. Like the Congo suffered so greatly, even with the race to cure polio, and then somehow polio turned into an AIDS epidemic that practically was a genocide washout of the Congo people that was there. And the person, Koprowski, I believe is his name, the scientist that was trying to cure polio, received the Nobel Peace Prize award. Later on, they said they debunked the fact that that's what happened. But you also had some animal handlers at that time that was talking about what they were doing with the chimpanzees in that area. Okay. So the polio vaccine was to be used through rhesus monkeys, but they were using feral chimpanzees. And then this is how this area gets populated with AIDS, HIV into AIDS at a very massive rate. Now we know people that had AIDS in the United States that died, and they died, in a I guess you can say a very level rate. But if you look at what happened in the Congo, people were literally dying off like zombies, getting sick and dying. So even after the death of him, the people from the Congo still suffered because I don't care what you say. You put Hitler and you put Leopold to the side, Leopold will always surface high because he done more damage to Congo than what Hitler has done. And it's not a comparison whatsoever. But again, you can go back and look at the chopped off arms of the kids that are 6 or 7 years old. You can look at that. You can see women that's there, to make examples of and still had them work in those tar mines. So, it's a very emotional tug of war that you have. And again, going back to what you were said, when you see us here in Black history in the United States, they always put those sanitized versions of Black leaders on the wall. Patrice Lumumba would never make that wall. He would never make that wall.
And we put the Nelson Mandela that we've curated now, the kind, gentle grandpa. We don't put the man who at one point really was fighting for the land.
Yes.
We put the one who said, truth and reconciliation, keep all the resources and tell us we have political power. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it even going back to Nelson Mandela and using Trevor Noah. I don't know if you had a chance to read his book. Oh my God. That was in the 80s when he was growing up, and he was talking about his separation from his mother and his father due to 5 years imprisonment if they found out that he was attached to that. So you still see that current divide. He even talks about the trench towns, the slum towns, the African towns, and everything, how everything was divided. It is the most powerful land on earth has been the greatest monopoly game of the European. And when you see that, when you get into places like England and study England, what you see is the fragmentation of the Roman Empire because most of their bloodline tracks through the Roman Empire. So there's nothing where you can't see Leopold that's connected to what? England, or Wilhelm Kaiser in Germany before Hitler connected to the Kaiser, married and connected to. Everything goes back to England because it's nothing more than the minds of the Roman fragmentation. That's all they are, Roman fragmentation. Even in the United States, the peasants that leave that area, the servants, they come here and then they're still overtaken by England because they're fragments of the Roman Empire.
So for those of you who, because we often get these questions, what book can I read? If you want to know more on the Congo, you can look at and in Belgium, you can look at King Leopold's Ghost, a story of greed, terror, and heroism in colonial Africa. But that would be a great one to start with. But every issue that we see in Africa right now can be traced right back to imperialism.
Or you could get go ahead. You could get the Congo from Leopold to. In fact, this gentleman, every book that comes out of Congo written has this man's imprint on it. He is currently the Congo's ambassador to the UN. Judges Unzagla Intalaja. That's one. And for the assassination of Lumumba, you could read, although it's a very old book, but still very relevant, you could read The Assassination of Lumumba by Ludo DeWitt.
So we will be sure to have these in the comment section, in the description section on our YouTube channel. So as we look at these two men cut down in their prime, let's also move towards another man who, and then I'm bringing all of these together because there were events in their lives that happened in this last 5 to 6 days. So January 15th being Martin Luther King's birthday, January 17th being the day that Lumumba was assassinated, January 17th also being the birthday of Muhammad Ali, formerly known as Cassius Clay. What is the legacy of Cassius Clay and now Muhammad Ali, and how do we continue to find the threads between all these three men? And let me put a pin here really quickly. In an era where an open enemy of Black people has now invited the likes of Snoop Dogg and Nelly to perform for him, to buck dance and tap dance and be all hot in here and take off all our clothes. And they have accepted, is my understanding. How do we, what message should the people, as they listen, as we're rethinking freedom, as we're thinking through how Martin Luther King lived and died, Patrice Lumumba lived and died, Muhammad Ali lived and died, and then this new era of folk. Who wants to start? How about you, Dr. Duckett?
Oh my goodness. Oh man. First of all, I would say by far, Muhammad Ali transcends most continents. And not because he was the greatest boxer of all time. It is because he's a man that stood on his principles. When his name was called, he did not step up for his belief. He became a conscientious objector. He was not afraid to fight the war. He just served another time. And he decided to serve time in prison. Whereas our president with flat feet that played basketball in college decided that, hey, I'm just not going because I'm scared. And that's basically what it is. So when you're dealing with these two different opposing figures, you can see where man stands on his principle. There's even white people that I know that are conservative, that they are Muhammad Ali lovers based off of him standing on his morals and values of being the man that he is and the man that he was today. And I say is because Ali is one of those people that still is alive, even though he hasn't been with us in a while. He's one of the most recognizable sports figures of all time, even with kids in school that had no connection with him whatsoever, because people still evoke his name as life in his belief and his consciousness. As far as the other buffooneries and clowns that we have that's in front of us, the Snoop Dogg, isn't it amazing that
a grown man called Snoop Dogg? I'm sorry. Snoopy was a cartoon character, wasn't he?
Yes. Isn't it amazing how we put so much favor on the man that walks around boasting about marijuana smoking, has disrespected our women, our mothers, our sisters. He gets a platform. He's going to get a presidential Medal of Honor. I keep telling people this. He's going to get one. And we always award these Sambos. We always award these Haywood Shepherds, these people that go around and they destroy us. It's amazing. Like for me, you know, a brother that wears dreadlocks and Snoop Dogg wears dreadlocks and everybody tries to put us together and say, oh, you like Snoop Dogg? No, I don't like Snoop Dogg. I never liked Snoop Dogg. I have a mother. I have a sister. You know, some of the stuff that he's done is deplorable, but he gets a pass. He gets a pass. He only gets a pass because he attacks Black women. But as soon as he starts attacking white women, he will no longer get a pass. So, yeah, I think we put these agents in place to kind of distract us from what the true message is. We find the most deplorable Black person to discredit a Muhammad Ali or a Dr. King or a Malcolm X because these guys stood for something greater than a Snoop Dogg. So,
when you talked about the power and the fact that Muhammad Ali has been passed for so long, but still what he engenders, how we feel about him. I heard him speak, if you can call it that, in 1997. It was a major event in Detroit, and there were all of these speakers that were brought together. And when I say heard him speak, I should put it in quotes, because at this time his disease was fairly advanced, and so he could say a few words, but even those words, he had to strain to understand what he was saying. So really the person who spoke for him was Lonnie, his caregiver. Again, talking about women, and I did told you we didn't talk about the woman behind the scenes with Patrice Lumumba. I'm hoping we have some time to at least give her a couple of minutes here. But it was really Lonnie that was giving the speech, and then, Muhammad is next to her, and yeah, it's like, you can do it. I mean, so he just said a few words. But even then, in this arena, I would say easily 30,000 people. We were also captivated by just the essence of the man, even though at that point his body was ravaged by the illness that he was fighting. And the fact that, we live in an age now where people are like, well, you got to secure the bag. And Muhammad Ali was like, take your daggone medal. Take, this is who I am, and that's what I'm going to stand for. It just seems like it was a different caliber of man. I know that we still have men like that today. We just need to see more. Yeah. We need to see more of them.
I think they're hidden. I think they're hidden, and I think a lot of them don't want to come out because we're in an era right now where our retirement means more than anything else, and we know what it is to be alienated and ostracized from the world or get fired right before we get that gold watch and that nice little pension or our 401k booming. So a lot of people kind of stray away from these type of conversations that we have, and it's amazing that you say what you say, because if you look at that era of men, I truly believe entertainment has its place. And Muhammad Ali was one of those rare figures that he had a lot to say, and what he was saying had a lot of meaning behind what he was saying. And even his coalition and who he brought together to coalesce, the Jim Browns, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, all the actors Sam Cooke, another entertainer that supported the civil rights movement. Yes. Once they found out,
and mysteriously died as a young man. Yes,
exactly. So he again was one of those gravitas leaders that could bring people in and say we have a common fight. He got a lot further based off of who he was, not the position that he was in the Nation of Islam, but the person that was around the world to be like the spokesperson of the African American community. And that's something that we do not see now in entertainment. Our spokesperson is this Snoop Cat, or Nelly, or whatever the case may be. And people listen to what they say. They're on the Tonight Show, they're on the news. But the educated elites, they're not there. The entertainers, like a Denzel Washington, you very rarely hear him talk. And when you do hear him talk, it is so powerful what he has to say. But a lot of times they don't get the platform.
Yeah. And it's funny enough that we're adding Muhammad Ali to the conversation, because Ali also has an African aspect. You remember Rumble in the Jungle?
Yes.
Yep.
October 30, 1974. Yeah. And he said at the press conference when he was asked, so what do you think will happen here? He said, well, what normally always happens. Ali is going to be the champion. And they said, why are you so confident? He said, well, I'm so confident because I murdered the rock. I hospitalized the brick. I'm so mean. I make medicine sick. And immediately the stadium just erupted. And then you knew Joe Frazier had no chance in that fight. George Foreman, I had no chance in that fight. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring that up because Ali knew what it meant to be an African. When he was training, and you can still see the videos on YouTube, there were people, kids, literally running with him early in the morning when he went to jog, And you could see the police were trying to contain the people, but he just told them, don't worry, just let them be. Don't worry, I'm okay. And Ali just kept to the point where I think the establishment saw that. And because he was a dissenter with Vietnam, he became not the kind of person that we can champion. So you saw
another parallel, dissenter with Vietnam. Martin Luther King was also opposed to Vietnam.
So Vietnam. So, and then you bring them into Congo. You bring their issues into Congo. So you are highlighting an American issue on a global stage. You need to quickly reel it back. And so you begin to see all of this. And this is the reason why it's very important to not do TikTok videos. Well, you guys don't have TikTok anymore. To do, sorry, I just had to get that in there. to do social media and read. Because I think this is a very important time. Maybe this 4 years.
We need to read. And yes. What Dr. Duckett does in particular with the young men that he's mentoring, he puts books in their hands and he sits and reads with them.
Yes. And that's very important for us, because literacy right now, the thing that we fought hard for is the thing we don't want to do anymore. We don't want to sit and we don't want to read a book. And I try to teach the kids, it's okay. It's fine. YouTube is there. I have no problem. Let's use YouTube as an adjunct towards our reading. So if I'm giving you a book, right now they're reading Ivan and Studemer. They came before Columbus. They're reading them. Yes, wow. And they're deep into it. And there's a lot of difficult words and stuff like that. But they went to Lester Middleton and they watched the talk show and they were amazed with Ivan and Studemer. And it was like, wow, we want to read his book. So now they're trying to acquire that knowledge. So each boy reads a chapter. We talk about the chapter, but they all have to read the chapter. They all have to be aware of it. And it's not like schoolwork. I'm not testing them or anything like that. It is just putting the book in their hand and giving them the intimate feel of what it is to sit there and do. And on top of this, the one thing that I preach, because this is how I've learned, read it, write it, say it, repeat it, is they do annotated bibliographies. And that's very important, because the annotated bibliographies actually become their computer data bank where they can go back through and retrieve that information if they need to talk about it or refresh their selves on it. So they're going to be working on your book probably in April. So I'm ordering it right now, and we're going to have you on. Aya's going to connect it, and you're going to talk to the boys. So
we'll do.
And by the way, Dr. Duckett, I see you repping Sankofa in DC. Hey, if you don't know, you need to know Sankofa. If you're in the DC area, you can go in there, pick up your books. However, they also have an online presence. Please support Black bookstores. And
speaking of
Rima and his wife, who own Sankofa, are some of the best doing this work. Yes, sir.
Speaking of films, actually on Lumumba, there is a film out right now titled "The Soundtrack to a Coup d'Etat." Soundtrack to a Coup d'Etat. It's 2 hours 30 minutes. It's, oh my God.
Yeah, so I'm an hour and a half into it, but had to sleep a little bit, and we'll finish it today. And yes, it is very interesting. Some information that I didn't know that was in there was where the uranium came from for the atomic
Hiroshima
bomb,
and Nagasaki.
That leveled Hiroshima. They got that stuff out of the Congo.
Yes.
It's crazy. Yes. So you mentioned the TikTok ban, and I bring that up because, one, it's devastating for a lot of people. There were people making their whole livelihoods from TikTok. I know my sons certainly watch a lot of TikTok and, had their TikTok pages or whatever it's called. But the issue for me here is when you look at the argument, or what do you make of the argument of why TikTok had to be banned? And if the concern is a foreign entity could possibly be collecting information on us, how does that jive with the fact that America collects information on everybody else? Quite frankly, Bezos and Zuckerberg and all of them and Musk are collecting information on us right now, whether it's through Amazon or Facebook or Twitter and so on and so forth. You actually even have military bases on other people's soil, but you're going to ban something because China could possibly do something with this information they have access to. How does all of this tie into the whole so-called freedom of speech, being a land of the free, privacy, and anytime that people try to fight for autonomy or some sense of sovereignty?
Well, I have to take, this is my favorite quote by Dr. Amos Wilson: whatever you do not control is used as a weapon against you. So the mere fact they have no control over TikTok is used as a weapon against them. So basically TikTok will go down, and one of those billionaires that's there will do something behind the scenes, and then we will own TikTok, and TikTok will be up and running. It might be TikTok ZZ or something like that. So
there you go.
They have to control it. This
is a takeover move. Period.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then last topic I wanted to bring up as our time winds to an end here is there is the inauguration of the orange one. I'm sorry that's about as much as he's going to get from me. A despicable human being. Forget politics, just a despicable human being all around is what I feel, and what his life has shown. And now there is this very heavy threat of deportations and families being separated. What, if anything, do you have to say to those families that are possibly facing this threat of deportation, and to people who care about this matter and what we could be doing as a community?
Oh man. Golly, I don't even know where to start with this. We knew this was going to happen. And you got to understand the background of this. The background of this is the populations that are coming into America believe in reproduction. And if someone believes in reproduction, other people's number have a tendency to drop. So the deportation of the people that's going out of here is very sad, but I don't think there's a whole lot that we can do about it. Only thing I can say from talking to a few people that I know is start getting your paperwork together now. Start working on getting your paperwork together now. Connect with an immigration attorney so that way you can start. Now is the time. Whatever money that you have invested is to invest in an immigration attorney so that way you can start working on it now, because now it is all a law type thing that's going on. So, yeah.
Anything that you would like to add to that, Adesoji? I know this is not your issue where you are yet, but I think that eventually you guys are going to have issues with your own immigrants over there.
No, we had, funny enough, we had something similar a couple of years ago when the people who came in on the Windrush, part of the Windrush, were basically disenfranchised and removed in the thousands. It's only now that they understand that the government had their hand in it, that, compensation is being paid. So, but to buttress the points that the Brother Duckett made, we have to be human enough to understand that there will be people around us that have these issues, and not to exacerbate the problem. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to bring that awareness around us. Yes, the deed of the election has happened, but after all, they're still human beings. And like Martin Luther King often says, once you see a human being in front of you, that's all they are. They're a human being. You have, he said it, in community and chaos, we're going to have to work together one way or the other.
Where do we go from here, community?
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah. So what I would say to people is, certainly if you're an attorney, you have legal skills, reach out to organizations within your area, particularly those of you who live in sanctuary cities, and offer your services. If you're willing to be trained, if you are multilingual, sometimes we just need people who are able to translate. Certainly, if you can donate to assist families, that would be really important. And then, like you said, Rodney, people need to plan ahead. And should something happen and I'm pulled out of my house in the middle of the night, my children know who to call or where to go. So all in all, as we wrap up today, I want to thank my guests. I want to thank those of you listening. Please go to our YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and share, and really grapple with these issues and figure out what changes you're going to make in your life, because it's not just about rethinking freedom. It is also now about taking action. So thank you so much for joining us.